Hi everyone! In today's video I'm going to talk to you about a painting that I've done over the past week. Now if you've watched some of my previous videos you'll know that I collect second-hand frames when I see them, and this is the one that I was going to use for this painting. As you can see it had lots of scratches on it. I had already filled those scratches with some polyfiller. And so first of all it was time to give the frame a little bit of a sand and paint it. This was the mount that I was going to be using. I was surprised when I turned it over to find that actually the double mount was just two single mounts stuck together. I removed the lovely little print of the seahorse. That's going to go to my mum's house because she would like it for a doll's house. And I taped the mounts together just so that they were a little bit more secure. I'm using parcel tape here that's paper. It's been brilliant for so many projects. So then it was time to move on to sanding the frame. This mount had a lot of damage, so I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out. I just used a damp cloth to give it a wipe after I'd sanded it, and when it was dry, I moved on to painting it. So this painting was going to be a gift for my mum for Mother's Day. And I know that she's used this paint for some of her own frames, so I wanted to make it match. This paint's been really brilliant for painting frames. It's self-levelling, so you don't really see the brush strokes when it's dry. So I was going to work on this little piece of watercolour paper today, but I was going to work in acrylics because I wanted it to dry quickly so that I could give it to my mum for Mother's Day. I normally paint with oil paint, but it takes a long time to dry. I drew around the inside of the mount so that I knew where I could paint on my paper, but I accidentally drew onto the mount, so I had to rub it out. And as you can see, I hadn't put my paper in quite the right position. So I taped my paper down onto this board. I wasn't sure if this paper was going to respond well to the acrylic paint. I normally work on canvas paper, or that's what I've been using recently anyway, but I wanted to try and use this piece of paper because I thought it had a nice texture. I taped the paper onto the board using the same parcel tape that I'd used to fix my mount in place. And then I used some of my acrylic primer to just add that base coat. I diluted the primer first and I was hoping that the tape would hold the paper in place so that it wouldn't crinkle. Once the base coat was dry, I used the same acrylic primer to paint my shapes and composition onto this little piece of paper. But this time I didn't dilute the acrylic primer, so it was a little bit darker. I was making this painting up from my imagination, so it was helpful to do this stage to think about the composition and the blocks of shapes that I needed. I also thought about which areas needed to have shadows. Now I've left a border around this at this point just because that's where the pencil line was. But I did then fill this border in because if I hadn't painted right up to the very edge of the pencil line, I didn't want it to be obvious when I added the colour. When I'm thinking about the composition, I like to work in rules of thirds. So you'll notice that my foreground with the grass is about a third of the way up the piece of paper. I referred to my colour mixing book to help me with the colours for my painting, but because I don't often paint with acrylic paint, I didn't have all of the colours that were in the book. And this proved to be a real problem, because I just couldn't get the colours that I wanted for this painting. So ever since doing this painting, I have been on the lookout for all of the colours mentioned in this book. If you've watched my previous videos, you might know that I invested in the exact colours of oil paints that were mentioned in the colour mixing book, and ever since I've done that I've become so much more confident with my colour mixing. So I would like to do the same with acrylic paint. The book's called The Colour Mixing Companion by Julie Collins. I know I mention it in quite a few of my videos. I'm not sponsored or anything like that, I just really like the book. I used to find colour mixing very, very difficult, but now with that book, I find it a lot easier. So I'd painted the moon in already, but it wasn't quite the right colour. It was looking a little bit orange. I decided to paint the sky a purple colour, but it was the rabbit's fur that I really found difficult to paint. As you can see, the rabbit looks quite a grey colour here. I wanted it to be more of a brown, but I was just finding it really difficult with my colour options of my paint. I tried to make the rabbit, or the hare, sorry, a little bit lighter, but then it looked too bright. So I then decided to add a bit of the same colour to the moon because I thought it might even out the painting a little bit, but this was a mistake. I blocked in the foreground and then I started to add some purpley colours to the foliage and the flora at the front, just to match the colour of the sky a little bit. I added some detail, so I added some little flowers. I was using a really, really thin paintbrush for this. I then went back to try and change the colour of the hair again. I actually think that the colour of the hair was better when it was the colour of the underpainting. I kept adding layers of paint in the hope that it would improve the painting. I added the stars, but I made a little mistake here because I couldn't really see the border anymore where I'd drawn the pencil line. So my best stars are actually now going to sit underneath the mount, which is a little bit unfortunate. At this point, I wasn't fully happy with my painting, but I decided to remove the tape just to see how it was looking. The moon looks a little bit of the wrong shape, but that's just because the edge right at the top is not going to be in the painting. I was finding it difficult actually to see the colours in my house. My lighting's really dark in my house, and I've been looking to see if I can get any brighter light bulbs, but I don't know if I need to actually change my light fitting. So I had to hold the painting at a different angle to try and see what colours I'd actually painted. This is what it was looking like, and I tried to arrange the mount so that it would catch the nice stars at the top, but that meant that the bit of the moon that was the wrong shape would also be visible. When the painting was completely dry, I wondered if I could add some of the colours that I wanted with some of these crayons. I was experimenting at this point because I wasn't happy with the painting, so I knew I wanted to do something to improve it. It did change the colours a little bit. You couldn't really tell that there was crayon on the painting, but it was becoming a little bit of a warmer colour. So rather than being an acrylic painting, this was now a mixed media piece of artwork. I made a mistake at this point because by adding this little bit of purpley colour, I actually filled in a little bit too much, and I think it's made the hair look a little bit out of proportion. I tried to add some flowers here in the foreground as well, but you couldn't really see this. I had a gold pen, so I decided to add a little bit of detail in gold because I thought it'd be nice if it had a little bit of a metallic shimmery effect. I also tried to add a few more stars with my white paint pen, but they weren't as good as the ones that I'd originally painted. And I added the final bits of detail using this fine line pen. And at this point I thought it looked quite like an illustration from a children's book, which I was quite happy with because it's quite similar to my style when I'm working digitally and doing digital illustration. I added some whiskers in gold. Again, this was another mistake. I tried to smudge them out, but obviously it's a permanent marker so they wouldn't smudge out, so then I tried to colour over them. I hid them a little bit, but I thought I can't actually rectify that mistake, so I decided to stop working on this painting at this point. and decide exactly where to put the mount. And then I added some tape to the back and stuck the mount in place. The glass from the frame had a little bit of a sticker on it from the price from when it was in the charity shop, and it needed a bit of a clean, so I used some warm soapy water to remove the label and I gave the glass a polish. And I popped it back in place once it was thoroughly dry, and then put my artwork into the frame. After closing the frame up, I then turned the picture over, only to realise that I'd completely forgotten to sign the piece of artwork and to write the title. So I removed it, and then I decided to put my signature and the title on the mount rather than the piece of artwork, just because I didn't want the signature to be too obvious on the artwork, and I thought it'd look nice on the mount. So I called this piece of artwork Moon Gazer, because it's a moon gazing hare. And this was the final picture in its restored frame. What do you think? So I gifted this to my mum for Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day, Mum! Thank you so much to everyone for watching. I hope that you liked the video, and please do leave a comment so that I know that you've been watching. I always read them all and I try to reply to everyone. I hope to see you next week, and thanks again. Bye!